As the Syrian government, led by Ahmed al-Sharaa, pushes back into territory long held by the Kurdish-led forces the Americans relied on against ISIS, has Syrian Kurds describing that shift as a major betrayal. One question jumps to the front line. If Washington could work with partners on the ground for years, and if it knew exactly who the power brokers were inside Syria, then how did Ahmed al-Sharaa survive, consolidate Idlib, and end up on the other side of a US policy pivot? The answer in short is that the American intelligence agencies have also been vetting and negotiating with Ahmed al-Sharaa and his HTS since 2015. Right now, the map is changing fast. Reuters reports Syrian troops consolidating control after an abrupt Kurdish pullback tied to an integration deal that's still contested on the ground. And Al Jazeera and The Guardian both describe Kurdish statements alleging betrayal as clashes flared around the towns in the north and east. So we need to tighten the lens on one man who helps explain how power really works in Syria and how US strategy adapts when reality wins. Ahmed al-Sharaa, known for most of the war as Abu Mohammad al-Julani, isn't just a former rebel. He was part of the petty aristocracy under Assad-led Syria. His family background carries several clear markers of status and regime-adjacent embeddedness. On his father's side, the family is traced to the pre-1967 Syrian Golan Heights, specifically the village of Fik. His grandfather, Ali, was a major landowner there, said to have held most of the village's land. That kind of land holding pedigree reads like rural notable class, property, local prominence, and inherited social weight. Before displacement reshaped the Golan community's place in Syria. After relocation, the family's position shifted from land to state-linked technocracy and urban status in Assad, Syria. His father, Dr. Hussein al-Sharaa, worked in the Syrian oil ministry and later served as an advisor connected to that same ministry. Exactly the sort of institutional proximity that mattered under an Assad system built on ministries, patronage, and strategic sectors like hydrocarbons. His family ran a store in Damascus's upscale al-Nusra neighborhood, reinforcing an image of comfortable placement in the capital's social geography. Even more telling, his uncle Farouk al-Sharaa was Assad's long-serving foreign minister and later vice president. His family was inside the wider orbit of the regime's elite. Ahmed al-Sharaa was an aristocratic rebel who joined al-Qaeda-linked militants fighting US forces during the Iraq War. He was captured and spent years in a US-run detention system. Those detention years mattered because they often function as an insurgent school where future leaders absorb discipline, networks, and methods, skills he later carried into Syria after his release, helping him found Jabhat al-Nusra, and later its evolution into HTS. With that said, the key to understanding how he gained the support of the Americans isn't Damascus, it's HTS-led Idlib. People often say he ruled Idlib for years. That's basically true, but only if we are precise about what ruled means. Influence is one thing. Armed presence, battlefield victories, intimidation, alliances. Governance is something else. The machinery of control, taxation, permits, courts, ID services, policing, an actual state-shaped system. The timeline looks like this. Late 2017 is when governance becomes institutional, because that's when HTS's aligned civil authority, the Syrian Salvation Government, is formed and begins operating as a technocratic facade for administrating Idlib. By January 2019 is the consolidation moment, when HTS defeats rival factions inside the Idlib pocket and expands their monopoly control over administration and security. The short, accurate line is this. Al-Sharaa governed Idlib through HTS from 2017 onward, with control consolidated by 2019 using the Salvation Government as the governing arm in territory HTS dominated. Now, what was his role inside that system? He was not a mayor, not prime minister, but think of him as the chief political military broker of a proto-state. HTS held a coercive power. That's the security forces, enforcement, the ability to decide who can operate and who cannot. And the Salvation Government functioned as the administrative wrapper, public services, taxes, identity documents, regulation. And the strategic environment mattered. In 2019, the international crisis group called Idlib the best of bad options, a place packed with civil servants and the hardest core remnants of the jihadist opposition under constant threat of reconquest by Assad. That's the context that produced al-Sharaa's survival strategy, not just to win battles, but to become unavoidable. He was a gatekeeper of an enclave the outside world could not simply wish away. America knew where he was and still didn't take him out. Now we get to the point we should really care about. Washington clearly didn't treat him as some obscure warlord. In May 2017, the US State Department Rewards for Justice program offered up to $10 million for information leading to his identification or location, describing him as the leader of al-Nusra Front, the Syrian branch of al-Qaeda. So why wasn't he taken out, especially if the US knew his ecosystem and whereabouts in Idlib? The deep strategic reason is this. By the time the HTS had consolidated Idlib, removing the central power broker could easily make the threat landscape worse. Decapitation can fracture control, create splinters, trigger revenge cycles, and open space for more radical actors. That's not a moral argument, just a cold description of how insurgent ecosystems behave. So the real choice Washington faced was often not strike or ignore, it was strike or manage. That said, we do not have a public record proving the US intelligence sat down with al-Sharaa back in 2015 or 2016, but we do have enough to make a strong inference that direct contact and message passing were likely for years. Here's why. When an actor governs territory, controls crossings, regulates aid, runs internal security, it creates choke points and intelligence on his location. And choke points create contact, even if nobody calls it diplomacy. Intermediaries carry messages, third parties test compliance, signals are exchanged through pressure and permission. And then after Assad's removal, the hidden became visible. In December 2024, US diplomat Barbara Leaf met al-Sharaa in Damascus and said the US received positive messages, while reporting also described the US dropping pursuit of the $10 million bounty. Then in January 2025, the Washington Post reported the US shared secret intelligence with Syria's new leaders via a backchannel, including intelligence that helps thwart an ISIS plot. That sequence matters. A pivot from "we'll pay for your capture" to "we're meeting you" to "we're sharing actionable intelligence" rarely happens with zero prehistory. The most reasonable inference is that earlier direct channels existed. Not necessarily friendly, not necessarily official, but functional. Probing through intermediaries or mediated by Turkey to test whether he could contain extremists, whether he could prevent ISIS spillover, whether he could keep an enclave from collapsing into total chaos. In other words, his reliability was tested over a 10-year period, bringing it back to today's betrayal. As Syrian government forces move into former Kurdish SDF held territory, forces the US relied on against ISIS, and as Kurdish voices describe betrayal, what we must remember is that Ahmed al-Sharaa isn't random, isn't new to American Middle East policymakers. He has been vetted, tested, and ultimately chosen over the Kurds to rule a unified Syria.